Hello. We have some information to share with you about preparing to field test the KEA Fidelity measure. The first bit of information we'd like to share is that we're still in the design process. We are designing the Fidelity measure with your help. This field testing will gather your feedback and then we'll use it to refine the measure. So as you can see, we'll go through you can see the picture on the screen. We're going to go through several iterations of this with a few school districts in order to come up with a measure that then we can use to gather fidelity data. At this point, we're not quite ready to begin using the data that we're collecting. But at this time, what we're doing is field testing the measure itself. So we won't use the data that we might gather to inform PD or coaching or from a consultant lens in order to know what's happening in the district. What we're doing at this point is actually still designing the measure so that we can come up with a measure that then is usable and is useful for you and your school district. And at this point, you're joining us as part of our design team so that we can accomplish that goal. We know that we can't do it without your help. So our role as the Research and Evaluation Work Group, R&E we call ourselves, is to engage in dual observations with you and debriefing and providing modeling support as we go about this process, and then to gather feedback from you and make improvements and refinements. We've designed something that we think might work. We have experience in classrooms and at the district level in theory and research, yet we know that we need to work alongside you and gather your expertise and your professional wisdom in order to have a measure that's going to be workable and usable by you and your school district. And we want to do this with you and alongside you in order to have a measure that's useful to you and the best one that we can have. So here's our ask of you. Your district implementation team members, your district team, will organize and prepare for visits that include observations in a couple of kindergarten classrooms, 2 to 3, with some time to discuss with the teachers. The measure, as you'll see, has some items to observe for and then some specific questions you might ask kindergarten teachers. So we'll need time to take a look at what they're doing and also to ask them some questions. And again, you'll engage in these observations with research and evaluation members and then provide us some feedback so that we can make improvements and refinements to the measure. So here's what the measure looks like. There's a link there at the bottom of the screen, and I'm just going to take us to it so we can look at it together. The measure is based on the 5 critical components of the formative assessment process, and they're color-coded. So here it begins with selecting learning targets, and each of the critical components has a couple of items. So selecting learning target has 2 items, I believe. This is the first item. You'll see for each one of these, I'm just going to make this a little bigger so we can see it more nicely. So here's the primary focus. So for selecting learning targets, the primary focus is the teacher has knowledge of where students are and where they need to go along each construct progression. So each critical component has a primary focus and then a couple of items. Here's item 1. The teacher uses current learning statuses to determine learning targets for each student. So that's what you'll be observing for. And then there's some suggested open-ended questions. And then there's a second item for this critical component. Teacher determines what each student needs to focus on next for applicable construct progressions involving the student as appropriate. So that's what you would be observing for, and then here are some suggested open-ended questions to have in conversation with the teacher. So this is how the fidelity measure is designed. It's the format of it. Here's the next critical component, developing criteria for success. Again, you see the primary focus. I believe this one has 3 items. So here you see one. Here's a second one, again with open-ended questions, and the third one. And so there's a place for notes and then a rating scale here once you've looked at all of the data that you've gathered. So each one of these is designed the same way, and there are 5 critical components. Here's the third one, eliciting evidence of learning. Four items for this one. Interpreting the evidence. See the beautiful color coding here. Has 2 items, adapting and responding to learning needs. Five items for this one, so it is the most complex. So the measure includes all 5 critical components. You would only be observing for 1 or 2 of those critical components and a couple of items. So let's review the visit details. Each member will observe for only 1 or 2 of the 5 critical components in partnership with a research and evaluation team member, and decide in advance which 1 or 2 critical components that you're observing. And then be sure that all are accounted for so we get a chance to field test each one of these critical components. And as I showed you, you'll read the primary focus for the critical component, give it a good read, look at the items, gain some familiarity with it, and then select what you might ask the teachers about in advance so that you're prepared to do that. So just to review again our ask of you, your team members will organize and prepare for visits that include observations in 2 to 3 kindergarten classrooms with time to discuss with the teachers, because we'll need time to ask them those open-ended questions for things that we didn't quite get through observation. Engage in these observations with research and evaluation members, and then provide feedback to make improvements and refinements to the measure. And know that we won't be asking you to fill out a survey or to meet with us afterwards or do an interview afterwards. We're going to gather all of the feedback that day. So we'll want to spend some time with you after we've done these observations to gather your feedback in the moment so that we can then immediately make refinements and then go on to our next school district so that we can have this continuous iterative process to make refinements to the measure so that we can prepare it for use in the field, and we'll have it ready for you in a timely manner. And we appreciate your willingness to engage in this process with us to create the best fidelity measure that we can with your professional wisdom and input. Thank you. When you have questions, you can contact your regional consultant or the project lead, Dan Tatro.